But even during this success, the Beatles were collapsing into legal warfare. When Paul McCartney sued the other three Beatles in December 1970, George, John, and Ringo united to fight back. They submitted legal documents insisting the band could still continue, even though they knew it was over. They just didn't want Paul to win the lawsuit outright. The court sided with Paul, and the band's money and assets were frozen and eventually divided up. George had chosen his side in the Beatles' civil war, and it definitely wasn't Paul's side. The wounds from this legal battle never fully healed. Years later, the pain was still visible. At the 1988 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, Paul didn't even show up. Ringo was reportedly too drunk to give a speech. That left George to accept the honor alone. His speech tried to smooth things over by saying they all loved John and Paul, but the message was clear. The Beatles were being honored as legends, but they were still broken as friends. The person George Harrison truly hated more than anyone was Paul McCartney. It wasn't John Lennon, even though John could be cruel and dismissive. It wasn't Ringo Starr, even though their friendship was damaged by the affair with Maureen. It was Paul who made George's life miserable for years by constantly putting him down, rejecting his songs, mocking his spiritual beliefs, and treating him like a servant instead of an equal partner. Paul's controlling personality and his need to be the leader crushed George's confidence and creativity. While John could be harsh, he at least respected George's talent. Paul never did. He saw George as the kid who was lucky to be in the band, not as a brilliant musician who contributed just as much to their success. The saddest part is that George carried this anger and pain until the day he died. On November 29, 2001, George passed away at the age of 58. His last public words were about his spiritual search. Everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait. Through all the drama, heartbreak, and contradictions, George never stopped trying to find peace. But he never found peace with Paul McCartney. The man who should have been his brother in music became the person he resented most in the world. Paul's treatment of George during their Beatles years created wounds that never healed. No matter how successful George became as a solo artist or how much spiritual wisdom he gained. The tragedy is that both men were incredibly talented and could have supported each other through the pressures of being in the world's most famous band. Instead, Paul's need to control everything and his lack of respect for George's contributions created a bitterness that lasted for decades. George Harrison was much more than the quiet Beatle.